This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Mark Martin. Sudan's military has overthrown and arrested President Omar al-Bashir, and it has taken charge of the country for the next 2 years. The move came after nearly 4 months of protests against Bashir's rule. Sudan's defense minister made the announcement on television. He says that after 2 years, free and fair elections will be held. He also says a state of emergency has been imposed for the next 3 months and that the military has suspended the Constitution and closed the borders and airspace. Our Gary Lane joins us now with more on the situation in Sudan. Welcome, Gary.
Glad to be here, Mark.
Well, first of all, is the military basically in control now, and is that a good thing?
Yes, the military is in control. Well, it depends on your perspective. If you're in the military, it is a good thing, but the people who've organized these protests are saying, no, it's not a good thing. This is not what we were looking for. It's one thing to get rid of Omar al-Bashir, the dictator of Sudan, but his people are still in place. And Mark, that would be like impeaching President Trump, but still having Pompeo and Pence, all of his cabinet members, all the people of the deep state as well, and that's what they still have in Sudan.
Well, what's been happening that's ultimately led to Bashir's arrest?
Let me back up just a little bit. Omar al-Bashir came to power in 1989 as part of a military coup, and he quickly imposed Sharia law, Islamic law, on the people, and that meant women had to have their heads covered, they had to wear burqas, they were mistreated, Christians were persecuted. He led a war for 20 years against the Christians of South Sudan. Finally, they became independent, and also committed all kinds of atrocities against the people of Darfur. And for that, he has an arrest warrant out, an international arrest warrant, from the International Criminal Court for the atrocities in Darfur. So that's the background. What happened back in December of last year, protests began over poor economy. The price of bread increased and people weren't happy with that. They couldn't make ends meet. So these protests started last December. They intensified this spring. And now in April, mass protests demanding the removal of Omar al-Bashir. The military has agreed, and they went and arrested him today.
So 2 years from now, can we really expect fair elections, and what can we expect going forward for the people of Sudan?
That isn't what the people who organized this protest, the Sudan Professionals Association, wanted. They want elections right away. They don't want the military in control. They would like a civilian board to oversee the transition to free and fair elections. And unless, Mark, there is pressure from the international community on this military regime now that has imposed emergency law on the country, I was going to say martial law, but it's like martial law. Unless there's pressure on them, they're not going to back down. But if there's international pressure, they may agree to have elections sooner than 2 years.
Okay, our Gary Lane, as always, we really appreciate your insights and giving us the bigger picture.
Certainly.
Thank you, sir. In other news, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is in police custody in London. He was arrested at the Ecuadorian embassy today for failing to surrender to the court in 2012. Assange took refuge there for the last 7 years until his asylum was revoked due to repeated violations to international conventions and daily life. He's accused of publishing thousands of classified military and diplomatic cables through WikiLeaks. The arrest comes just 1 day after WikiLeaks accused Ecuador's government of an extensive spying operation against Assange. Assange's lawyer says they will fight extradition to the U.S. Authorities arrested a man accused of starting the fires at 3 historically black churches in rural southern Louisiana. Law enforcement arrested a 21-year-old white man, Holden Matthews. The state fire marshal said federal investigators are looking into whether hate motivated the fires. The Associated Press reports the St. Landry Parish Sheriff said Matthews is the son of a deputy, and the sheriff also said the father knew nothing of his son's involvement. AP also reports the state fire marshal said the danger to the community is gone now, and the fires were an attack on our God and our religion. Israel is making space history, sending its first spacecraft to the moon. Our Middle East bureau chief tells us Israelis are getting to watch it happen.
It's been quite the week here in Israel. On Tuesday, Israel held its national elections. And today, on Thursday, Israel is literally going to the moon. The spacecraft, called Bereshit, also known as Genesis, or from the first 3 words in the Bible, in the beginning, is scheduled to land on the lunar surface at 10:30 Israeli time. That would make it about 3:30 East Coast time. That would make Israel, a tiny nation of 8 million, just the 4th country in the world to land on the lunar surface, following the United States, Russia, and China. It's an amazing accomplishment, and it was done by a nonprofit. It took about $100 million to do this. It was launched in February 21st. Then it went into orbit around the Earth. And then it was sort of like a slingshot all the way to the moon. On April 4th, it was captured by the lunar orbit, and it's been in lunar orbit for the last several days, and scheduled, as I say, on 10:30 Israeli time. An amazing accomplishment for such a tiny nation. We'll be there in the control room covering events for Facebook Live. We'll also be having a report on tomorrow's 700 Club and continuing coverage on the CBN News channel. I'm Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thank you, Chris. The space capsule was also carrying a nano copy of the Bible. We're going to have more coverage of the landing tomorrow morning on NewsWatch. It's been a historic week in Israel. Before the moon landing, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu won an unprecedented 5th term in the national election. Our John Jessup and Jenna Browder spoke with author and Israeli resident Joel Rosenberg about the mood following Netanyahu's win.
Well, first, I think people are stunned, either stunned with excitement. There was very few people that were sure that he was going to win a re-election. In fact, the polls showed that he was behind most of the campaign. The polls certainly showed that he and the Likud party were closing the gap in the final week, but even the exit polls did not indicate that with any assurance that Netanyahu was going to essentially pull a magic trick. They call him a magician, like he pulled a rabbit out of the hat again. Most people didn't see it. Even people who were for him went to bed thinking, I don't know. But there's also a whole swath of the country that it was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. He's here forever. And so it's a mixed and it's a mixed view right now here.
Joel, what does Netanyahu's re-election mean for the United States and also for the Middle East peace process?
Great question. The first thing I would say is that with Prime Minister Netanyahu being reelected, and again, almost certain to be able to put a coalition together, that's still, we'll see that over the next few weeks, but it means that there's continuity for the Trump team. President Trump knows Netanyahu well. Obviously, the Trump peace team, the architects, Jared Kushner and the rest of the team, they know Netanyahu and his team well. So there'll be continuity, and they'll be very happy about that. They won't have to change their game plan for Benny Gantz or the others who could have come in and been the new leaders here. In terms of how it will actually affect the peace process, look, I'm of the view that the Palestinian leadership under Mahmoud Abbas have absolutely no intention of saying yes to any plan that President Trump puts forward. They will probably read the plan, but I wouldn't even put it past them not to read it. I mean, I'm sure they will, but I'm just saying there's no indication that Abbas and his team are even open at all. So the question remains, does the plan allow for the Gulf state Arab leaders to say, why would the Palestinians reject this plan? It's not perfect, but it's reasonable, it's credible, it's a serious plan. The Palestinians should sit down and negotiate. And if the Palestinians don't, in theory, it could open up an opportunity.
I want to talk to you about believers there in Israel. How do they perceive Netanyahu?
Yeah, well, there's about 30,000 Messianic Jewish believers in Jesus here in Israel now. There's another 4,000 to 5,000 Arab evangelicals, and then there are, 10,000 or more Christians of various other kinds, mostly evangelicals, living, working, serving in the country in various capacities. It's interesting, Jenna. I think there's quite a divide between how American evangelicals perceive Netanyahu and how believers see him here. I think American evangelicals see the best of Netanyahu, which is true about him, but he's a complicated man. American evangelicals see him as a statesman, as a visionary, as a strategic thinker who, you know, I don't know who else could have stared down President Obama and taken on and resisted and refuted the Iran nuclear deal, and then gone on to persuade President Trump to scrap that nuclear deal and reimpose economic sanctions, crippling sanctions on the Iranian regime. That was the right thing to do. Netanyahu resisted President Obama's efforts almost to force Israel to relinquish strategic territory to Israel's most, to Israel's sworn enemies. So evangelicals see that in Netanyahu, and they like that. Netanyahu's opening diplomatic bridges to China, to Brazil, to India, to the Arab countries. And this is Netanyahu at his best. But local followers of Jesus here see that, but they see other things. They see, for example, that he gives an awful lot of power and money to ultra-Orthodox religious parties that are hostile to Christians, hostile to Messianic Jewish followers of Jesus. I mean, very hostile. That Netanyahu has said very unkind, very harsh things to Arabs here in Israel, Arab citizens we're talking about. Even saying recently that a new law made it clear that only Jews were real citizens of Israel and no one else really was. I shared that deep disappointment with Netanyahu on some of these, including the fact that Netanyahu brought into his political coalition in recent weeks, honestly, and I say this with deep disappointment, because I worked for Netanyahu 19 years ago, but he brought in a party called Otzma Yehudit, Jewish Power, that is a racist, bigoted, anti-Arab, anti-peace party that was really associated with a violent extremist party that was outlawed here 25 years ago. So these are things that have caused Israeli Jewish believers and evangelicals here mostly to vote for center and center-right parties, but not for Bibi. And I will tell you that I was one of them who struggled because I see both sides of Bibi, what he's very, very good at and what he is, and the mistakes that he makes that are very disappointing. And I couldn't bring myself to vote for him this time around, though I respect him. I pray for him. But I guess I'm becoming a little more Israeli than I was when I could only see him from a distance.
Coming up, people in the world's largest democracy are voting this week. A look at India's historic elections and what it could mean for the country's minority Christians.
CBN presents The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
We're going to talk about some of the incredible promises God has made to His children.
In Pat Robertson's newest teaching, you'll discover the I Wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation, and see amazing stories of God's promises in action.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Break free from stress and despair.
The Lord doesn't want you to live in fear, but to know the rewards given to those who love God.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com. The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Welcome back. India's massive election, the biggest in history, kicked off today with the incumbent prime minister seeking a second term in office. Opinion polls put Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Hindu-led party as the favorite, but he faces a stiff challenge from Rahul Gandhi, the leader of the opposition Congress Party. Some 900 million registered voters will head to the ballot box over the next several weeks to elect a new parliament and prime minister. Most experts say the election is a referendum on Prime Minister Modi, who has led the country for the last 5 years with an absolute parliamentary majority. And CBN senior international correspondent George Thomas joins me now. George, this election in India really is a gargantuan undertaking. Talk about that.
Absolutely. I mean, let's just run the numbers here as we look at the video. We have 900 million registered voters. There are 11 million election officials, 1 million polling stations, 2.3 million electronic machines. There are 2,354 registered political parties. I mean, here in the United States, we're talking about just Republicans and Democrats. In India, 2,354 registered parties. And so, yeah, it is a massive, massive operation. Keep in mind, it started today and it goes all the way to till May 19th, and the elections will be announced on May 23rd.
Wow, we think one day is a big undertaking here in the U.S., let alone several weeks over there. What are the top issues that Indian voters are concerned with?
Yeah, so the Pew Research went out and did this enormous survey, and they found that 76% of Indians say a lack of employment opportunities. 73% say rising prices from everything from eggs, oil, milk, sugar, all these things. 66% say corruption among officials is a huge problem. 65% say terrorism is a big problem. 64% say crime is a big problem. Now, you have to remember that when the BJP, the Hindu-led government, came into office back in 2014, they had, like you mentioned in the lead-up, they had absolute majority both in the parliament and in the prime ministerial office. And so there was, they had high popularity ratings back then. Today, it's a different story. They are struggling with Rahul Gandhi. If you know the name Gandhi, it's the Gandhi dynasty that is continuing. Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, and now Rahul Gandhi, the son of Rajiv Gandhi. He runs the Congress Party, and he's putting up a stiff opposition against Narendra Modi.
Well, let's talk about India's minority Christians. They've faced intense persecution under Modi's Hindu-led government. What does this election mean for them?
Well, it's significant. In many ways, it's a difficult time for India's Christians. Just last year, persecution against believers went up a whopping 57%. When Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister of India, according to Open Doors World Watch list, which looks at the number of sort of the worst place in the world for persecution of Christians, back in 2014, India was ranked number 28 on the World Watch list. Today, it ranks number 10, and the persecution that they are experiencing is intense, from the burning of Bibles to the arresting of pastors getting beaten up, churches being destroyed. It is a mammoth assault against believers. Why? Because as you see these images on your screen, Hindus are embracing Jesus Christ, and that message of acceptance, that message of worth in the eyes of God is so revolutionary, and it is changing the hearts and minds of so many people.
All right, George Thomas, thanks as always for your insights.
You're most welcome.
All right, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time: keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
I think as a father, it's my job, to lead. Just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
Millsburg Falls man. Come.
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes too, and so much more. Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon. It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
Discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com. The I wills of God, the latest teaching from Pat Robertson.
When Belgium legalized euthanasia, critics warned it was headed down a dangerous path. Now the European nation may have hit bottom as medical ethics are being overtaken by a culture of death. Dale Hurd reports from Brussels.
Belgium has long been famous for food, like waffles and chocolate. But now it's becoming famous for something else. Belgium has one of the most liberal euthanasia laws in the world. You could end your life here by simply telling a doctor that you have unbearable physical or mental suffering. Terminally ill children of any age can receive a lethal injection if their parents agree with the child's wishes. Tom Mortier's mother was euthanized in 2012 because even though physically healthy, she was said to be incurably depressed.
My mother, who was physically healthy because of her mental problems, received a lethal injection from an oncologist.
It was done without his or his family's knowledge. He was only told by the hospital the day after his mother was killed.
My mother had several mental problems. She had to cope with depression throughout her life. She was treated for years by a psychiatrist, and the contact between us was broken. A year later, she received a lethal injection.
Mortier filed a complaint with the medical board and then with a prosecutor, but was turned away. With the help of Alliance Defending Freedom, Mortier appealed his case to the European Court of Human Rights, which has agreed to hear it. His legal counsel is Robert Clark.
Like, how can a physically healthy woman who has struggled with depression, who's had good days and who's had bad days, how can someone like that be euthanized in a democratic Western country without the family members even being aware that it was happening?
Something that makes this case even more disturbing is that the doctor who euthanized the woman sits on the very government body that is supposed to oversee the euthanasia law. The doctor, Wim Distelmans, who some have compared to the late Dr. Jack Kevorkian, once led a euthanasia tour of Auschwitz under the theme, Death with Dignity. Distelmans is co-chairman of Belgium's Euthanasia Commission.
We have a significant conflict of interest where someone is essentially acting as judge and executioner in his own cases.
When Distelmans' commission did nothing after a dementia patient was euthanized without asking to die, one doctor quit the panel, writing that he did not want to be part of a committee that deliberately violates the law.
There are now more than 13,000 euthanasia cases that this commission has reviewed. And in those 13,000, I'm aware of now one which has been referred to the prosecutor.
As ethical safeguards have fallen in Belgium, some say killing has become a part of medical care.
We began to offer death as a medical solution even for non-terminal cases. It is a problem. I have heard about people who were offered euthanasia even though they were not even considering it.
The types of conditions, the things that would qualify someone for euthanasia are being pushed further and further out. In the most recent reporting period, there were euthanasias carried out on children as young as 17, 11 and 9.
The supply of euthanasia stirs the demand. What you see is that for an increasing amount of people, euthanasia becomes the default way to die.
When we find someone who's requesting to die, who's standing on the proverbial edge of a bridge, And instead of trying to talk them down, the state is pushing them off.
Clark says Belgium is now the ultimate cautionary tale for any nation that wants to legalize euthanasia.
And I think we have to ask ourselves, is that the kind of society that we want to live in? Or do we want to live in a society with laws that say that vulnerable life should be protected and that all life, no matter what stage and no matter the health of the person, has dignity and value?
Dale Hurd, CBN News, Brussels.
And we'll be right back with more of CBN Newswatch. Stay with us.
As the world watches from the outside,
it's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline, Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres-Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
Kathy Lee Gifford may have left the Today Show, but she is continuing to leave her mark in film and television.
Hagar was a single mother. She was abandoned by the family.
That is the sound of her latest project, The God Who Sees. Gifford teamed up with award-winning worship artist Nicole C. Mullen for the powerful short film. It tells the story of Bible figures like Hagar, Ruth, David, and Mary, and the promises God made to them. Gifford wrote and directed the short film, which was shot in Israel. Gifford says she hopes the film will not only encourage people spiritually, but make them want to visit Israel as well. Looks very powerful. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here, and you can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day.